And we're back. This is Professor Giles for AR105. And we are looking in the Baroque in Spain at Velázquez. And this is one of Velázquez's most famous masterpieces. It's at the Prado Museum in Madrid now. It's called The Maids of Honor, or Les Meninas. And it's a very complex painting. People get various interpretations about it, but here's just a couple things to point out. Um, Self-portrait of Velázquez. Here he is painting a family portrait. He's been doing portraits like um, this and like this for the royal family. And we don't know whether he conceived this or got an idea from somewhere else, but he's doing a family portrait of the Princess Margarita coming to see his parents get their portrait done. And how do we know that? Because this is a mirror in the background with the detail. Here's a mirror. The artist with his canvas here and his paints and his brushes is looking at us. Margarita is looking at us. This maid is looking at us. The dwarvish woman here on the side is looking at us. The teacher back here is looking at us. The minister for the government is back here looking at us. So we are the focal point. But there's also this mirror that shows these two images. And if I bring these in, it is the queen and the king. So what Velázquez has done is very cleverly created a self-portrait of himself, painting a portrait of the king and queen without actually showing them clearly, except through the mirror in the background. So very clever. It shows this large room, great images of these people, especially Margarita. Many people say this is the most perfect painting ever created. You can argue that, of course. But some of the other things is, look at this dog who's very grumpy looking, but why? It's because of the little kid over here. And you can just see him pounding, pounding, pounding his foot into the back of the dog, and the dog just takes it. Okay, very well mannered. So this influenced some artists in the future from Spain that we'll see. But the idea of a cameo appearance or a self-portrait in a portrait has come out by other artists a few times. Okay, so let's move up to Flanders, which is, I believe, the southern area of the Netherlands. Now, understand that when Protestantism took over in the Reformation, that little areas of the countries, very small areas of countries, were allowed to vote and select which religion, quote unquote, do you want to go with? Catholicism or Protestantism? And due to politics and all, the southern part went Catholic and the northern part went Protestant. So even though they're in very close proximity to each other, and both of them are using techniques and all of the Baroque, it separated. And we see a great difference in the style and manner of the southern, which is Roman Catholic, with the northern, which is Protestant. But let's look at the Roman Catholic in Flanders first. And Peter Paul Rubens, very much known for his muscular bodies that he represents, and buxom females that we'll see. Everything is curvaceous, not just the bodies, but everything. Look at this horse. Look at the mane coming down. The muscles on the horse match the muscles, how dramatic it is. And this is a very Catholic looking altarpiece. One, it's an altarpiece, which almost by definition is Catholic. But we have Mary over here, very young looking, John the Apostle, the others looking on. Was there really a Cocker Spaniel at the crucifixion? I don't think so, but he's adding it in, part of his local culture. Um, the darkness here as the moon is about ready to move in front of the sun. Timing's a little off there for Passover, but he's might be saying that's what explains the darkness that came for the 3 hours during the crucifixion. So very active, very theatrical. Again, it's that Catholic idea of the Counter-Reformation through the arts to counteract Protestantism. Okay, another one by Peter Paul Rubens of Marie de Medici, of the famous Medici family in Florence. And here's the barge with her brother or her cousin who was the Pope, and she's marrying the King of France. So this is a very famous incident, and here she is being brought out with this procession. Okay, and then down below we have these figures, these sea nymphs, and sea god looking guys here with tridents. So you have the real world versus the mythological world meeting here. And this angel with trumpets, because it was such a great thing that she was getting married. If I remember right, she's only like 14, 15 years old, and it's a totally political endeavor. So let's move on. So that's sort of the Roman Catholic real quick, and we are moving quickly here. But then the Protestant area, they're still using the Baroque theatrical view a little bit, but they bring it down. They're honoring God by showing life and objects and landscapes and animals and people. And for the first time, we're seeing artists create their own art for their own enjoyment. And during this time in the Netherlands, there was this great rise of the middle class where people actually had money that they could save, that they could get luxury items. And part of that were portraits of their family. That art was not only for the church or for the government, it was actually for the people now. And it was a status symbol. So you could actually go out and hire an artist to professionally create your family or yourself or your daughter and put that up over the mantle at night. So here is just a spattering. Landscapes are very, very popular, especially in Holland during this time because it is so flat. And we see one of the grand cathedrals in the background and windmills all over the place here, and then other churches. And then being Protestant, here is a little area where they're creating cloth, and they're bringing the cloth out that's been created, and they're drying it in the sun to bleach it out. So it's about work, that the Protestant work ethic going on here. Okay, still lifes. That's one of the major areas where instead of showing crucifixions and martyrdoms, they wanted to do something that was more inside and not Catholic, really. So they could talk about things with objects where, yeah, the enjoyment of music, the enjoyment of learning a book, enjoyment of food, nuts, learning with writing, with the ink, and so forth. But there's time, where this is a timepiece, a watch. Time is there. And the cup is turned over, that death will occur, and there's a skull, reminding us as Protestants that death will come, not to be vain or to focus on the vanities of life, but focus on our devotion to God. Okay, very important to this time period. Another artist is Frans Hals, And he did things like this. Okay, groups of people, and these are portraits done so well that people walking into the room where this was go, oh, that's Bob, or that's Tim, or whatever their names are. Notice they look like the Three Musketeers. That's the time period we're dealing with here. Okay, but he also did individuals. I mean, look at this guy, the Laughing Cavalier. Look at that mustache. That looks like something that some hipster would have today, but it is going back from that time period. And this collar, he's showing his wealth with this embroidered jacket. The cuffs here, everything is really showing his wealth. And here's another one. Different pose, different man, but it's a portrait of someone trying to show their status. So he was very well known for that. But let's move on to Rembrandt. Not to go highly in depth, but Rembrandt is a Protestant. He was very successful, especially early in his life, but then had many setbacks, deaths in the family, bankruptcy, and he died without a penny. At one time, all of his house and everything was put up for auction, including his paintings and his brushes and his paints. And he was in so much debt that if he was hired to paint for someone, that the painting would be taken by the creditors and he wouldn't be able to give it to the actual person. So his wife and one of his sons set up a company and hired him, and that allowed him to work through them, at least some. So he would do pieces like this, sort of like Frans Hals, where he would do groups. And this is one of his more famous groups, anatomy lecture, where he's showing this doctor and a corpse, and they're looking at tendons and ligaments in the arm. And, it's very, very soft. It's very much like Caravaggio, dark and light, dark and light. But he was very much into showing portraiture, but he was also doing lots of biblical themes during this time, including, if I can get that to come up, including Abraham sacrificing Isaac, which is just extraordinary. I saw this live at St. Petersburg, Russia, back in the 90s, and just enthralled by it. It is just an awesome piece. But he also did more of these groups. His most famous piece is the Night Watch here, that was actually basically rejected by the people who asked for it because they wanted something like this. But what they got was this, where they're actually doing something, because this company was more like a National Guard armory, but it had been so long since they had to do anything with the military because it was so peaceful. But they still met together and they just became fat old men, basically. But this actually shows them doing things military-wise, and that's not what they wanted. They wanted big images of their faces, not this active thing. But it did become one of his most famous pieces. Another famous one is The Return of the Prodigal, and it is not finished, which is rare, but it really shows this emotion of the father accepting back his son that lost all the money. But he also did lots of work with black and white imagery, etchings, and all. And he's very famous for self-portraits, including this one that's in London, that is one of the last ones that he created. And it really shows him late in life when he's destitute and he's just worn out. But it's a great image and personality of himself.